Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm taking more of your questions in another segment of Ask Judy. I have one here from Fiona Sharp 595 who asks, I'm sure you may have already covered this and I apologize, no problem. Was there a regular cast member who you never had a scene with, and was there a particular visiting cast member that you would have loved to have worked with on the Waltons but didn't get the chance? In terms of cast, all of the regular cast, we work together. Maybe not in every single episode. You might not have a scene with everybody in every episode. But usually the whole family was around the dinner table at some point, endlessly, usually many times. And so you always were in episodes with other cast members and family members. The recurring characters like Ike and Corbeth, or the Baldwin sisters, the Reverend, Miss Hunter, those sorts of characters. We had scenes with them sometimes and not others. You know, there were a lot of group scenes at parties and gatherings and things. So we did work with all of those recurring characters from time to time. In terms of guest stars, yeah, there were times where you didn't really work with a guest star, or you only briefly did. So would have loved to have worked more with some of the incredible people that came through with Ron Howard. It would have been nice to have, more scenes with him, or not just kind of a group thing, or Jonathan Frakes, or, we did get to work with Beulah Bondi, which was lovely. And John Ritter, who, it wasn't like anybody knew. John Ritter wasn't John Ritter yet, but we all really loved working with him. So things like that were fun. So, but when I look back at some of the incredible people we worked with, I wish I'd had more scenes or had one-on-one scenes with them. That would have been special. From Dave CGS, who said, what is the general definition of a process shot? I read online that it's when you film in front of a projector. Is that right? Basically, they have shot footage of the roads, the country roads, in the Walton backlot or whatever. And then if they're shooting from the front of the truck, say, or John Boy's car, and you see through the back window, then there is a projector screen behind the vehicle. They bring it onto the soundstage, the vehicle, and they place it in front of this projector, and then they literally run that footage of the road, and it is synced with the film speed of what you're filming in the camera for the scene that you're shooting, and they just roll that at the same time. And then if you're going to be on a sideways shot, say you're shooting on the driver's side, you see John Boy, but he's talking to Mama, and so you see out the side of the vehicle, then they would have shifted so that footage is footage that would be you driving by and what you would see on the side of the vehicle, and they do the same thing, and they just move it around like that. So I think it must have been easier and more cost-effective to do that at that point in time, rather than having to rig the vehicle with cameras and stuff like that, and continually go back and forth over the same section of road and match that up. And so I think it just was an easier, more cost-effective thing to do, although I don't know that it was particularly inexpensive to do. But that's my understanding of it. I think, perhaps John Dayton will elaborate on it more at some point or in the comments. And you're saying you're wondering if it was cheaper than, say, blue or green screen. Don't know. We didn't really use blue or green screen at that point on our show. I think they did in the Ferris wheel with Cammie and some of those sort of floating off the Ferris wheel kind of thing. And they had her like suspended and swinging and stuff on ropes on a sound stage. So I think they did use whatever it was. I think it was blue screen at that point. For that, and then they lay in the footage afterwards. So I don't understand a lot of those technical or budgetary issues, questions. So then, thinking of haircuts, I know you mentioned that you were allowed different hairstyles, but I wondered if you had in some clauses in your contracts to prevent certain hairstyles from being allowed, such as dyeing your hair. There was nothing specific in the contracts, but I think it was just sort of an understood thing. I remember I did get highlights. I think I may have, I don't know if I got a perm because I think that happened more in the 80s. But yes, I got a number of haircuts that were not stylistically of the period. That was in later seasons. And why I didn't bother to ask. I mean, I guess I just figured they could work with it. And I just think I wasn't really thinking that much about it at the time, but no clauses in the contracts. Dave had another question here about the romances on the show. Got me curious about how the actors themselves felt about these situations. For example, between, say, Ellen Corby and Will Geer, or Michael Learned and Ralph Waite, because I keep thinking that being romantic as actors, how does this translate to off-screen? Is it just a job and you just tune it out when the scene is done, or do you develop more personal relationships with your romantic on-screen partner? I think that totally depends. I mean, you certainly hear about romances that started while people were filming. So when you're playing these romantic roles and you're creating these very personal, intimate sort of relationships, then sometimes those feelings do spill over. Sometimes they last, sometimes they don't. You know, Will and Ellen were such pros, and I think they were good friends. Obviously, Will was the one that was concerned when Ellen didn't show up at work and insisted they go and check on her, probably saved her life. And Michael has talked about how she and Ralph really did love each other. They never acted on it, but they considered going on a date at one point. But they were super close. And I think that happens, that you can just get really close with people that you have those sorts of relationships with, but it doesn't mean that it becomes anything else. So it just depends. And sometimes it is awkward because you don't particularly relate to the person that you are supposed to be in love with, or you just met them, or they're there as a guest star for a few days and that's it. So it is a job in many ways. And you know, as an actor, you have to create all kinds of believable emotions and feelings about things that may not be how you feel about them. So it's part of the craft, and you just do whatever you individually do to make something believable. So hope that answers that. And then you had one other question, wondering how does one prepare for such a thing as an actor, because you have to act and then kiss, flirt, hug, so on. Is it hard to act in situations like that? How do you prepare for it? I think everybody has their own way of doing it, but you know, we've all experienced feeling love for someone, you know, even if it's just someone that you're really close with. Maybe it doesn't even have to be someone you actually had a relationship with, but we understand those feelings, so you just project those, and you just have to imagine that person that you're having this scene with, that you have those kinds of feelings for. And so whatever the scene calls for, that's what we do as actors, is we create believable emotions, and whatever it takes to relate to those and bring those about. Obviously, the less you really like the person you're working with, the more you're acting, and so the more awkward it might be. And particularly when you're talking about all these cameras and things being around, and it's not a personal, intimate moment, and yet you're creating one with tons of people watching, and you're, you know, kissing people that, you know, with cameras and people standing around watching. So you can be a little self-conscious, but you just have to sort of tune that out. The same as when you're doing highly emotional scenes, and you have to tune everything out. So just part of the job. That's what I have for this segment of Ask Judy. If you're enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. And if you have a question, you can put it in the comments below. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more of your questions in another Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.